The Force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of light and darkness, life and death. But what happens when a single moment, a choice made in rage and pain, severs one of its most crucial threads? The galaxy would soon learn that some deaths echo louder than others, and the absence of one Jedi Master would reshape the fate of trillions. The lava flows of Mustafar churned beneath a blackened sky, their orange glow painting the world in shades of damnation. Anakin Skywalker stood on the obsidian bank, his yellow Sith eyes blazing with fury and power, his lightsaber humming with deadly purpose. Across from him, Obi-Wan Kenobi backed toward the collection platform, his expression etched with profound sorrow. The duel had raged across the lava mining facility, through control rooms and across repulsor lift platforms, each clash of their blades. A conversation of betrayal, love, and irreconcilable philosophy. "It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground." Obi-Wan's voice carried across the hellish landscape, edged with desperation. He had seen this pattern before in their sparring sessions, knew that Anakin's aggressive Form V would drive him to attack from a disadvantageous position. It was a tactical certainty, a defensive master's ultimate gambit. But Obi-Wan had miscalculated. The Anakin he had trained, the impulsive Padawan who would have leapt directly at him, no longer existed. The dark side had given Anakin something his Jedi training never fully provided, patience born of absolute conviction. Where the Jedi taught restraint through discipline, the Sith offered clarity through passion. And in that moment, fueled by his love for Padme, his fear of losing her, and his hatred for the Jedi who had denied him everything, Anakin saw with perfect clarity. He didn't jump. Instead, Anakin extended his hand, and the Force responded with terrible obedience. The collection platform beneath Obi-Wan's feet shuddered, its repulsor lift stabilizers shrieking as invisible pressure crushed their circuits. Obi-Wan's eyes widened in realization. A heartbeat before the platform lurched violently to the side, sending him stumbling backward toward the lava flow. Obi-Wan called upon the Force to leap to safety, but Anakin was already there, using the Force to propel himself in a lateral arc, not the predictable upward jump Obi-Wan had anticipated. Anakin closed the distance in a blur of dark robes and crackling energy. Their blades met once more, but this time Anakin had momentum, position, and the absolute certainty that his master's defensive style couldn't adapt quickly enough. The duel lasted 3 more exchanges. Obi-Wan parried the first strike, redirected the second, but the third, a vicious, diagonal slash powered by every ounce of Anakin's Force-enhanced strength, shattered his defense. Obi-Wan's lightsaber flew from his hand, disappearing into the lava below, before the Jedi Master could summon it back or draw upon the Force. For one final defense, Anakin's blue blade, still the weapon he had carried as a Jedi, not yet bled to crimson, pierced through Obi-Wan's chest. Time seemed to stop. The sound of the lava falls faded. The heat became distant. Obi-Wan Kenobi, the negotiator, master of Sorisu, the man who had been more than a teacher, a brother, looked into Anakin's eyes. There was no anger in Obi-Wan's gaze, only infinite sadness and a whisper that barely escaped his lips. "I loved you, Anakin." The Sith Lord who had been Anakin Skywalker felt something crack inside his chest, not regret, he told himself, but the final severing of his old life. He pulled his blade free, and Obi-Wan Kenobi collapsed to the scorched ground. The Force rippled with the death of one of its most devoted servants, a disturbance that would be felt by every surviving Jedi across the galaxy. On Dagobah, Yoda gasped and wept. On Alderaan, Bail Organa felt a chill he couldn't explain. And in orbit above Mustafar, aboard his shuttle, Emperor Palpatine smiled. Anakin stood over the body, his breathing heavy, his mechanical hand clenched around his lightsaber. The dark side whispered its approval, flooding him with strength, with certainty, with the promise that he had done what was necessary. Padme would be saved. The corrupt Jedi Order had fallen. The Republic would be reformed into something stronger, something that could bring true peace to the galaxy. He didn't notice the shuttle descending through the ash-filled sky behind him, its sleek form cutting through the heat shimmer. He didn't sense the cold satisfaction radiating from the presence within. Anakin Skywalker had won his duel, had proven his power by defeating the greatest defensive fighter the Jedi Order had ever produced. But as Darth Sidious emerged from his shuttle, black robes billowing, pale face illuminated by the lava's glow, the true game was only beginning. The Emperor had planned for Anakin to be broken here, to be remade into a crippled servant bound by cybernetics and pain. Instead, he now faced something far more dangerous. A fully intact Sith Lord who had just discovered the intoxicating taste of ultimate victory. Lord Vader, Palpatine said, his voice carrying a note of reassessment. You have done well. Anakin turned, his yellow eyes meeting his master's. For just a moment, something flickered in those eyes, not doubt, but calculation. Then it was gone, buried beneath layers of dark side conditioning and desperate need. Master, I have fulfilled your command. Obi-Wan is dead. Now you will teach me to save Padme. Palpatine's smile never wavered, but behind it, ancient gears began to turn. The rule of two had just become far more complicated. If you want to see more alternate Star Wars timelines that explore how single moments can reshape the entire galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop your own what-if scenario in the comments below. May the Force be with you. The Emperor stepped forward, his gaze moving from Anakin to the corpse of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and in that moment, both Sith Lords understood that the master-apprentice relationship had fundamentally changed. One battle had ended. Another, far more dangerous, had begun. The Emperor's shuttle lifted from Mustafar's surface, carrying two Sith Lords and the weight of a galaxy forever altered. Anakin sat in the passenger compartment, his hands still trembling, not from fear or regret, but from the sheer magnitude of power coursing through his veins. The dark side had never felt so potent, so responsive to his will. Every breath drew it deeper into his lungs. Every heartbeat pushed it further through his body. He was whole, unmarred, and more powerful than he had ever been as a Jedi. Palpatine observed his apprentice with calculating interest. The plan had been elegant in its cruelty. Allow Anakin to be mutilated on Mustafar, then rebuild him as a cyborg monstrosity dependent on Sith alchemy and technology to survive. Pain would have been his constant companion, a tool to channel into dark side power while simultaneously ensuring absolute obedience. A crippled Vader could never truly challenge Sidious. But this Vader, intact and victorious, presented an entirely different equation. You are troubled, my apprentice, Palpatine observed, his voice carrying false concern. Padme, Anakin said immediately, leaning forward. You promised me the power to save her. I've done everything you asked. I killed the Jedi younglings. I destroyed the Separatist Council. I struck down Obi-Wan. Now give me what you promised. The Emperor's withered hands folded in his lap. The power to cheat death is not simply given, Lord Vader. It must be earned through understanding, through study of the ancient Sith arts. Your wife is in medical distress on Polis Massa, attended by Senator Organa and the traitorous medical droid. We must go to her now, and I will guide you in using the Force to sustain her life until you have learned the deeper secrets. Anakin's eyes narrowed. Something in Palpatine's tone felt evasive, but the urgency of Padme's condition overrode his suspicion. Then we go now. Order the pilot to set course. Already done, Palpatine replied smoothly. But tell me, Lord Vader, when you faced Kenobi, did you feel doubt? Did the light side call to you? The question hung in the recycled air of the shuttle. Anakin replayed the moment in his mind. Obi-Wan's final words. The look in his eyes. The way his former master had fallen without resistance in those last seconds. He searched within himself for guilt, for the anguish he knew a Jedi would feel. He found only cold certainty. I felt nothing but clarity, Anakin said. The Jedi taught me that attachment leads to suffering. They were right, but not in the way they thought. My attachment to their dogma, to their rules, to their betrayal of everything they claimed to stand for, that caused suffering. Loving Padme, protecting her, choosing her over their corrupt order, that is strength. Palpatine's smile deepened. The philosophical rationalization was proceeding perfectly, even if the physical transformation had not. The Jedi fear the dark side, because it empowers individuals to act on their truest desires. They prefer slaves who mouth platitudes about peace while the galaxy burns. You have transcended their weakness. The shuttle broke through Mustafar's atmosphere, and the medical facility on Polis Massa appeared in the viewport. a cluster of sterile white modules clinging to an asteroid, one of the few places in the galaxy where former Jedi sympathizers might believe themselves safe. Palpatine could sense the life forces within Bail Organa, radiating noble concern. The medical personnel, anxious and confused, and Padme Amidala, her life force flickering like a candle in a storm. But there was something else. Two new presences, impossibly small and bright, pulsing with unprecedented force potential. Palpatine had sensed them before, had factored them into his plans. But those plans had assumed a crippled, controllable Vader who could be manipulated regarding his offspring. This Vader, whole and increasingly confident, would react very differently to the discovery that Padme carried. Twins strong in the Force. The Emperor made his decision in the span of a heartbeat. The children would need to be hidden, separated, their existence, concealed from Vader, until they could be turned into weapons against their father, or until Vader's usefulness had expired and a new apprentice was required. It was the way of the Sith. But first, Padme Amidala had to die, and Vader had to believe he had failed to save her. The shuttle docked with the medical facility's emergency port. Stormtroopers who had accompanied the Emperor from Coruscant immediately secured the corridors, their white armor stark against the facility's dim lighting. Anakin didn't wait for formalities. He burst from the shuttle, following Padme's presence through the Force like a beacon, ignoring the panicked medical staff who scattered before the yellow-eyed specter in Jedi robes stained with ash and blood. He found her in the delivery room, her body racked with contractions, her beautiful face pale with shock and pain. Bail Organa stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder, his expression transforming from concern to horror as Anakin entered. Anakin, Padme gasped, and despite everything, the reports she had heard, the terrible things he had done, hope flooded her voice. "I'm here," Anakin said, rushing to her side and pushing Bail away, with casual Force-enhanced strength that sent the senator stumbling backward. "I'm here, Padme. Everything will be all right. I have the power to save you." The medical droid, a BD-3000 unit, continued its work with professional detachment. Senator Amidala is entering active labor. The twins will be delivered within minutes. However, her life signs are failing. The cause is unclear. There is no physical injury, but she is losing the will to live. Twins. Anakin's head snapped toward the droid. "What did you say? You're going to be a father, Ani?" Padme whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Twice over. But I saw what you did at the temple. I saw the security recordings. The younglings, Anakin. How could you?" Palpatine entered the room then, his presence like frost on glass. He observed the scene with ancient eyes. Vader discovering his children's imminent birth, Padme confronting him with his crimes, Bail Organa reaching subtly for a comlink. The senator would need to be dealt with carefully. He was too influential to simply kill, and his loyalty to the new empire would be necessary for maintaining order on Alderaan. "Lord Vader," Palpatine said quietly, "focus. Use the Force to stabilize her life energy. Draw upon your love for her, your fear of losing her. Channel it through the dark side. This is the first step toward the power you seek." Anakin placed his hand on Padme's swollen belly, feeling the two tiny lives within, their Force signatures impossibly bright and pure. In that moment, something shifted inside him, not redemption, not light returning, but a terrible new resolve. These were his children, his legacy, his family, and he would burn the entire galaxy to ash before he let anyone take them from him. The Force responded to his will, dark side energy flowing from his hand into Padme's failing body. She gasped as power surged through her, her eyes widening as she felt the wrongness of it, cold where it should be warm, taking even as it gave. "Ani, stop," she pleaded. "This isn't you. This power, it's killing you inside. It's saving you," he corrected, pouring more energy into her, refusing to let her slip away. "Just hold on. Trust me." The medical droid announced the first child's crowning. Bail Organa watched in silent horror as one of the galaxy's greatest heroes wielded the dark side to preserve the life of the woman he loved while delivering the children who might one day be the galaxy's last hope or its final damnation. Palpatine watched it all, his mind already working through revised contingencies. The game had changed, but the Sith always adapted. And if Vader proved too powerful, too independent, well, the Emperor had not survived for decades by failing to plan for betrayal. After all, it was the Sith way. The first cry pierced the sterile air of the medical facility, a sound that should have brought joy but instead seemed to herald something far more complex. The medical droid worked with mechanical efficiency, severing the umbilical cord and performing the necessary health assessments while Anakin maintained his dark side grip on Padme's fading life force. "It's a boy," the droid announced, holding up the infant. "Healthy, strong lung capacity, unusually high midi-chlorian count." Anakin barely glanced at his son, his entire focus locked on Padme. Her breathing had stabilized under his force influence, but he could feel the resistance. Her body wanted to surrender, her broken heart pulling her toward death even as his power forced her to continue. Sweat beaded on his forehead from the concentration required. "The second child is coming," the droid reported, adjusting its position. Minutes later, another cry joined the first. A girl, also healthy. Remarkably, her midi-chlorian count matches her brother's. "I have never seen such readings in newborns." Palpatine's eyes gleamed. Twins of unprecedented force potential, born to the chosen one. The possibilities were intoxicating and dangerous. He observed Vader's technique with professional interest. The boy was crude in his application, forcing life into flesh that wished to die. But there was raw power there that even Sidious had to respect. Given time and proper training, Vader might indeed learn to conquer death itself. The Emperor could not allow that. "Padme," Anakin whispered, finally pulling back enough to look at her face. "Look, our children. You have to stay with us. You have to meet them." Padme's eyes flickered open, heavy with exhaustion and something deeper, a spiritual weariness that went beyond the physical. The medical droid brought the twins to her, placing the boy in her left arm, the girl in her right. For a moment, maternal instinct overrode everything else. She looked down at her children, memorizing every detail of their tiny faces. "Luke," she whispered, gazing at her son. Then, turning to her daughter, Leia, "Those are beautiful names." Bail Organa said quietly from his position near the wall, where two stormtroopers had positioned themselves to ensure he made no sudden moves. His mind raced with the implications of everything he was witnessing. Obi-Wan had entrusted him with a mission: protect these children from Vader. But how could he do that when Vader was right here, very much alive and fully capable? Anakin finally allowed himself to look at his children properly. His son had his eyes, or rather, the blue eyes he'd once had before the dark side changed them. His daughter had Padme's delicate features. They were perfect, innocent, and represented everything he had fallen to the dark side to protect. The irony was not lost on him, though he refused to acknowledge it as such. "Our family," Anakin said, his voice carrying a possessive edge that made Padme's breath catch. "Nothing will ever harm them. I'll make sure of it." "At what cost?" Padme asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her strength was returning, sustained artificially by Anakin's dark side intervention, but her spirit remained fractured. "Ani, what have you become? I went to Mustafar to find you, to bring you back. I saw the facility, the dead separatist leaders, the burning wreckage. And Obi-Wan? Where is Obi-Wan?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Anakin's jaw tightened, his yellow eyes meeting Padme's brown ones. In that gaze, she found her answer, and the last pieces of her heart shattered. "No," she breathed. "Anakin, no. He was your brother. He loved you. He tried to kill me." Anakin snapped, his anger flaring. The lights in the medical bay flickered as his emotions rolled the Force. "He chose the Jedi over me. He chose their corrupt dogma over our friendship. I gave him a chance to join me, to help me save you and reform the Republic into something better. He refused. Because what you're proposing isn't better." Padme's voice rose despite her weakness, maternal instinct giving her strength. "Anakin, you killed children. You murdered Jedi younglings who trusted you. How is that bringing peace? How is that justice?" Palpatine decided it was time to intervene before this domestic dispute undermined months of careful manipulation. "Senator Amidala," he said smoothly, moving closer to the bed. "You are distraught. Understandable, given the circumstances. Perhaps you would benefit from rest while Lord Vader and I discuss the future." I'm not going anywhere without my children, Padme said fiercely, clutching Luke and Leia closer. Of course not, Palpatine agreed, his tone soothing as a serpent's hiss. They are yours, after all. But consider, the galaxy believes you dead. The Republic has fallen. The Empire rises. Your former colleagues in the Senate are either swearing loyalty to the new order or facing arrest for treason. Your association with Lord Vader makes you a target for any surviving Jedi or rebel sympathizers who might seek revenge. Are you threatening me? Padme asked, her political instincts cutting through her emotional turmoil. I am offering you protection, Palpatine corrected. Your husband is now the Emperor's right hand. Your children are heirs to tremendous power, but the transition period will be dangerous. Until order is fully restored, you and the twins must be kept safe. Secured. Bail Organa understood the subtext immediately. Secured meant imprisoned. Protected meant controlled. Palpatine intended to use Padme and the children as leverage over Vader, ensuring his loyalty while preventing him from becoming too independent. It was brutal, efficient strategy. Exactly what one would expect from a Sith Lord, who had orchestrated a galactic war as a means to seize power. Anakin looked between his master and his wife, conflict warring across his face. The dark side whispered that Palpatine was right, Padme and the children needed to be protected, kept away from danger until the Empire was secure. But something else, some vestige of the man he had been, recognized the cage being built around his family. Where would they go? Anakin asked carefully. Naboo, Palpatine suggested. The Lake Country estate where you and Senator Amidala honeymooned. Remote, defensible, beautiful. A full garrison of stormtroopers to ensure no harm befalls them. Medical staff to monitor her recovery. And the twins' development. And you, Lord Vader, could visit whenever your duties to the Empire permit. It was a gilded cage, and everyone in the room knew it. But Padme, exhausted and overwhelmed, found herself considering it. She looked down at Luke and Leia, both sleeping peacefully now, unaware of the dark destiny being woven around them. Perhaps separation from Anakin was what they needed. Perhaps, given time, she could find a way to escape with the children, to raise them far from the Empire's influence. I want Bail to come with me, Padme said suddenly, her political acumen asserting itself. As a witness, to ensure promises are kept, Palpatine's smile never wavered, though annoyance flickered in his ancient eyes. Senator Organa has responsibilities on Alderaan. His absence would be conspicuous. Then let me go to Alderaan, Padme countered. Bail can vouch for my safety, and the Queen has always been sympathetic to humanitarian causes. I could help with refugee relief efforts, give myself purpose beyond this. She gestured vaguely at the medical bay, at the empire that had swallowed the Republic, at the husband who had murdered his way to power in the name of saving her. Anakin felt the sting of her words, the implicit rejection. His hands clenched into fists. Padme, I did this for you, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Everything I've done has been to save you, to give us a future where we don't have to hide our love, where our children can grow up with their father openly acknowledged. I never asked for this, Padme whispered. I never wanted an empire built on the corpses of innocents. I wanted you, Anakin. Just you. Not Darth Vader. Not this. The rejection cut deeper than any lightsaber wound. Anakin stepped back, his expression hardening into the mask of Lord Vader. Fine. If she couldn't understand now, she would in time. He would prove to her that his actions were necessary, that the Empire would bring true peace, that their children would inherit a galaxy worth ruling. Naboo, Anakin said coldly, making the decision. Under guard. You'll want for nothing. Padme closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. She had lost everything. Her husband, her republic, her freedom. All she had left were the two small lives in her arms and the desperate hope that somehow, someday, she could give them a better fate than the one Anakin had chosen. Bail Organa watched the family fracture in real time and knew that the galaxy's future had just become infinitely more complicated. Obi-Wan was dead. Padme was a prisoner. The twins were under Vader's control. And the Empire had begun with a Sith Lord who had suffered no consequences for his victory. 3 months passed like a slow death. Padme Amidala, former Queen of Naboo and Senator of the Galactic Republic, sat in the gardens of Varekino, her lakeside retreat that had become her prison. Luke slept in a bassinet beside her while Leia fussed in her arms, tiny fists waving at the setting sun that painted the lake in shades of amber and gold. It should have been paradise. Instead, it was a cage lined with silk and enforced by stormtroopers. The garrison Palpatine had promised numbered 50 soldiers who patrolled the estate's perimeter with military precision. No visitors were permitted without Imperial clearance. No communications left the estate without being monitored. Even the medical staff who attended to the twins' health filed reports directly to the Emperor's office. Padme knew because she had caught one of the nurses transmitting data, detailed analyses of Luke and Leia's midi-chlorian counts, their developmental milestones, their sleeping patterns. The Empire was studying her children like laboratory specimens. Anakin visited once a week, arriving in his black command shuttle with an escort of TIE fighters that screamed across Naboo's skies like harbingers of darkness. Each visit followed the same painful pattern. He would spend hours with the twins, holding them with surprising gentleness, speaking to them in soft tones that reminded Padme of the man she had married. But when he looked at her, his eyes, still that unnatural Sith yellow, held only frustration and wounded pride. "You could be happy here," Anakin said during his latest visit, watching Luke grasp his mechanical finger with infant determination. "The war is over. The Clone Wars, the political corruption, the separatist threat, all of it ended. I've brought peace to the galaxy." "You've brought silence," Padme corrected quietly. That's not the same thing. She had heard the reports despite her isolation. The Empire's HoloNet broadcasts celebrated victory after victory. Jedi traitors eliminated, insurgent cells crushed, entire systems brought to heel through. Star destroyers parked in orbit and Moffs appointed to govern with absolute authority. The Senate still existed, but as a toothless advisory body that rubber-stamped every imperial decree. Democracy had died to thunderous applause, or rather, to enforced compliance and fear of consequence. Anakin's jaw tightened. "You don't understand the bigger picture." The Republic was rotting from within. The Jedi had become arrogant, blind to the suffering they allowed while they philosophized in their temple. The Senate was paralyzed by bureaucracy and special interests. Someone had to make the hard choices, and that someone appointed himself Emperor. Padme shot back. "Anakin, Palpatine manipulated you. Everything he told you about the Jedi trying to take over, about them being traitors, he orchestrated the entire war. He was the Sith Lord the Jedi were searching for. He played both sides, and you helped him win." "I know who he is," Anakin said, surprising her. "I've always known. He told me before I went to the temple. He's Darth Sidious, the last of the ancient Sith. And yes, he manipulated events. But his goals and mine align. A strong, unified galaxy that can defend itself against external threats and internal decay." Padme felt cold dread settle in her stomach. Anakin wasn't a puppet being controlled. He was a willing partner in tyranny. The distinction made everything worse. "What about when your goals stop aligning?" she asked. "The Sith don't share power. Ani, the rule of two means one master, one apprentice. Eventually, either you'll try to kill him, or he'll try to replace you." Anakin smiled then, a predatory expression that had no place on the face of the boy she had fallen in love with. "Let him try. I'm not the broken apprentice he expected. I defeated Obi-Wan Kenobi, the greatest defensive fighter the Jedi Order ever produced. I've hunted down and eliminated 17 Jedi Masters in the last 3 months. My power grows every day. When the time comes, I'll be ready." The casual admission of murder made Padme's blood run cold. 17 Jedi. 17 people who had survived. Order 66 only to be tracked down by her husband. She looked down at Leia, who had finally settled into sleep, her tiny face peaceful and innocent. How could she explain to her daughter someday that her father was a mass murderer? How could she tell Luke that the man who held him so tenderly had slaughtered children? "You need to leave," Padme said quietly. "I'm not finished." "Leave." Her voice rose, sharp enough to make Luke stir. "Every time you come here, you bring darkness with you. You're poisoning this place. Poisoning me. Just go. Go hunt your Jedi. Go serve your Emperor. But don't pretend this is a family visit." Anakin stood slowly, his expression hardening into the Vader mask. He placed Luke back in his bassinet with exaggerated care, then turned toward the garden exit. But he paused at the threshold, looking back at his wife and children. "I saved your life," he said. "The dark side power sustaining you. Without it, you would have died on Polis Massa. Every breath you take, every moment you spend with our children, exists because I refuse to let you go. You owe me gratitude, Padme, not contempt." "I owe you nothing," Padme replied, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You think you saved me? You killed the man I loved and left this monster in his place. The Anakin Skywalker I married died on Mustafar, even if his body survived." The words struck deeper than she intended. For just a moment, genuine pain flickered across Anakin's face, a crack in the Vader facade that revealed the wounded soul beneath. Then it was gone, replaced by cold fury. "I'll return next week," he said. "My children deserve to know their father." He left without another word, his black robes billowing behind him as stormtroopers snapped to attention. Minutes later, his shuttle roared skyward, and Padme finally allowed herself to break down completely. She wept for the Republic, for the Jedi, for Obi-Wan who had tried to save them all. But mostly she wept for her children, who would grow up in a galaxy ruled by fear and their father's twisted vision of peace. Far across the galaxy on Coruscant, in the newly christened Imperial Palace that had once been the Jedi Temple, Darth Sidious reviewed surveillance footage from Naboo with calculating interest. He watched Vader's confrontation with his wife, observed the emotional vulnerability Padme still evoked. It was a weakness, but also a tool. The Emperor had allowed the family reunion because it served his purposes for now. Vader's attachment to his children made him controllable, gave Sidious leverage. But attachments could be severed when necessary. The Emperor turned his attention to other matters. Reports from across the galaxy detailed the ongoing Jedi Purge. Master Luminara Unduli captured on Kashyyyk. Knight Canon Jarrus disappeared on Collar. Master Quinlan Vos gone to ground in the Outer Rim. Most would be found eventually. Vader was proving to be an exceptionally efficient hunter. His intimate knowledge of Jedi tactics and hiding places making him far more effective than any Inquisitor. But there were other concerns. Whispers of dissent on Mon Cala, labor strikes on Ryloth, a Mandalorian clan refusing to acknowledge Imperial authority. The Empire was vast but fragile, held together by fear and military might rather than genuine loyalty. And then there was the matter of Vader himself, growing stronger, more confident, less submissive with each passing week. Palpatine had foreseen this possibility. Vader without his cybernetic limitations was indeed a threat. But the Emperor had not survived decades of Sith scheming by failing to plan for contingencies. There were ancient weapons hidden in Sith temples, forbidden techniques that even Vader did not know, and if necessary, a contingency plan that involved a cloning facility on Exegol and the possibility of transferring his essence into a new body. The rule of two might dictate that the apprentice eventually surpasses the master. But Darth Sidious had no intention of allowing tradition to end his reign. On Naboo, Padme rocked her children and sang them a lullaby her own mother had sung to her. Song about freedom, hope, and a brighter tomorrow. Luke and Leia listened with solemn baby concentration, their force-sensitive spirits drinking in their mother's love like water in a desert. They would grow up in a galaxy without the Republic, without the Jedi, without the 1,000 points of light that had once made civilization worth fighting for. But they would also grow up as children of prophecy, heirs to both the Chosen One's power and their mother's unconquerable spirit. The Force moved in mysterious ways, and even the Sith could not see all ends. In the garden shadows, unnoticed by stormtrooper patrols, a small R2 unit watched and recorded everything. Bail Organa had managed to slip one loyal droid into the estate before security protocols tightened. R2-D2 stored every conversation, every moment, building a record that might someday prove crucial. The little astromech didn't fully understand his mission, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. These children were important, and someone needed to bear witness to their story. The first chapter of the Empire had been written in blood and betrayal. The next would be written by those who survived, and by the choices two children would make when they finally learned who their father truly was. The Empire's first year transformed the galaxy into something unrecognizable. Star destroyers orbited 1,000 worlds. their wedge-shaped hulls casting shadows that reminded populations of their new reality. The Jedi Order was declared extinct, their temple on Coruscant converted into the Emperor's palace, their teachings branded as religious extremism. Senators who had once debated galactic policy now scrambled to prove their loyalty or disappeared into the expanding network of imperial detention centers. And at the center of this transformation stood Darth Vader, no longer the conflicted apprentice Palpatine had anticipated, but a force of nature that reshaped everything he touched. Aboard the Star Destroyer Devastator, Vader's personal flagship, the Dark Lord stood before a viewport watching hyperspace stream past in blue-white streaks. His appearance had evolved over the months, the ash-stained Jedi robes, discarded in favor of black armor. That was ceremonial rather than life-sustaining. Unlike the sealed suit Palpatine had designed for a broken, burned apprentice, this armor was sleek and functional, inspired by ancient Sith warriors but incorporating modern technology. His breathing remained natural, his movements unrestricted. He was everything the Emperor had feared, Vader at full capacity. "My lord," Admiral Kendall Ozzel approached cautiously, datapad in hand. "We've received confirmation from Ryloth. The Twi'lek resistance leader Cham Syndulla has been captured. Your orders? Bring him to me," Vader said without turning. "Alive. I want to understand what motivates these rebels who think they can challenge the Empire." Ozzel hesitated. Standard Imperial protocol was immediate execution for insurgent leaders. But Vader had been deviating from protocol increasingly over the past months, interrogating prisoners personally, studying their motivations with an intensity that made career officers uncomfortable. Some whispered that the Dark Lord was having doubts. Others, more perceptive, recognized that Vader was building his own intelligence network, independent of the Emperor's. "As you command, Lord Vader." The Admiral departed, leaving Vader alone with his thoughts. The truth was more complex than doubt or loyalty. Vader was learning that the galaxy's problems couldn't be solved with lightsaber and force choke alone. Each rebel he crushed spawned two more. Each world brought to heel through military force simmered with resentment. The empire his master had built was effective at maintaining control, but terrible at inspiring genuine loyalty. It reminded him uncomfortably of the Republic's failures, the very corruption he had sought to eliminate. The realization had been growing like a cancer in his mind. Perhaps he had traded one broken system for another, exchanged democracy's paralysis for tyranny's brutality. Neither served the people they claimed to protect. His comlink chimed, a direct line from Coruscant. Vader activated it, and Palpatine's holographic form materialized before him, hooded and hunched. "Lord Vader, I trust your mission to Ryloth proceeds successfully." "The resistance is broken," Vader reported. "Syndulla will be in custody within hours. The Twi'lek people will accept Imperial governance." "Excellent. Your efficiency continues to exceed expectations." Palpatine's praise carried an edge of calculation. "However, I have a new assignment for you. One that requires discretion." Vader turned fully toward the hologram, waiting. "Senator Bail Organa of Alderaan has been making inquiries," Palpatine continued, "about your wife and children, about their well-being, and whether they might benefit from relocation to his world, where medical facilities and educational opportunities would be more robust. He presents these concerns as humanitarian, but I sense ulterior motives." "Organa was with Padme on Polis Massa," Vader said, his voice dropping to a dangerous register. "He saw the births. He knows about the twins." "Precisely. And while Senator Organa has been cooperative with the Empire, his reputation as a defender of Republic ideals makes him a potential rallying point for dissent. I want you to visit Alderaan personally. Remind the Senator of the consequences of excessive curiosity about Imperial family matters." It was a test, Vader realized immediately. Palpatine wanted to see if he would threaten or even eliminate Bail Organa, a man Padme considered a friend. The Emperor was probing for weaknesses, measuring how far Vader's attachment to his former life still reached. "I will handle Senator Organa," Vader said carefully. "But my family's security is my concern, Master, not yours." The hologram flickered slightly, Palpatine's expression unreadable behind his hood. "Of course, my apprentice. I merely seek to protect your interests. After all, your children are precious." It would be unfortunate if they were to become targets for those who might use them against you. The implied threat was crystal clear. Vader's hands clenched into fists, the Force responding to his rising anger by causing the viewport to crack slightly. Palpatine was reminding him that the twins' safety depended on Vader's continued obedience. It was leverage, pure and simple. The children are well protected on Naboo, Vader said, forcing his voice to remain level. No threat will reach them. See that it remains so? The Empire has many enemies, and they would not hesitate to exploit any vulnerability. Palpatine's hologram began to fade. Report back when you have dealt with Senator Organa. And Vader, remember that attachments, while useful, can also be chains. Do not let yours become a liability. The connection terminated, leaving Vader alone in the observation deck. For long moments, he stood motionless, his mind working through the implications. Palpatine was threatening his family. Not overtly, not yet. But the message was unmistakable. Remain the obedient apprentice, or the twins would be used as weapons against him. The dark side whispered solutions. Kill Palpatine. Take the Empire for himself. Rule as Emperor Vader, with Padme as Empress and his children as heirs to a Sith dynasty that would last 1,000 years. The power was within his grasp. He could feel it. But there were complications. Palpatine was ancient, cunning, and possessed secrets of the dark side that Vader had not yet mastered. A direct confrontation might end with his death, leaving his family vulnerable. No, he needed time. Time to grow stronger, to learn everything the Emperor could teach him, to build his own power base within the Imperial military. And then, when the moment was right, he would strike. The rule of two dictated that the apprentice must eventually surpass the master. Vader would simply accelerate the timeline. But first, Bail Organa. The Devastator dropped out of hyperspace above Alderaan 3 days later, its massive form disrupting the peaceful planet's orbital traffic. Alderaan was one of the core worlds that had embraced the Empire willingly, its leadership recognizing the futility of resistance. But it was also a world of philosophers and idealists, where the memory of the Republic was cherished and discussed in academic circles and diplomatic salons. Vader descended to the royal palace in a Lambda-class shuttle, accompanied by a full platoon of stormtroopers. The show of force was intentional, a reminder that even Senator Organa's influence could not protect him from imperial displeasure. Queen Breha Organa received him in the throne room with all the diplomatic grace Alderaan was famous for. She stood beside her husband, both dressed in formal regalia, their expressions carefully neutral. Vader recognized the fear beneath their composure. Good. Fear was honest. Lord Vader, Bail said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. To what do we owe the honor of your visit? Senator Organa, Your Majesty. Vader inclined his head slightly, a minimal gesture of respect. I understand you have been inquiring about my family, about their welfare and potential relocation to Alderaan. A humanitarian concern only, Bail replied smoothly. Senator Amidala, forgive me, Lady Vader, has always been dear to us. We merely wish to ensure she and the children wanted for nothing. Your concern is noted, Vader said coldly. And unnecessary. My family is well cared for. They require no outside intervention. Breha stepped forward slightly, her diplomatic instincts overriding caution. Lord Vader, we meant no offense. Padme is isolated on Naboo, cut off from friends and the life she knew. We thought perhaps some connection to familiar faces might ease her. My wife's isolation is temporary, Vader interrupted. A security measure during the Empire's transition period. When the galaxy is stable, she will have more freedom. And when will that be? Bail asked, unable to contain the question. Vader turned his full attention to the senator, and the force pressure in the room intensified, making breathing difficult. When I determine it is safe. Senator, your dedication to your Republic ideals is well documented. But the Republic is dead. Those who cling to its memory risk being branded as insurgents. I would hate for Alderaan to suffer such a designation. The threat was explicit now. Bail felt his wife's hand tighten on his arm, a silent plea for caution. He had pushed as far as he dared. Any further and Vader might decide the Emperor's suspicions were justified. We are loyal servants of the Empire, Bail said carefully. Our concerns for Lady Vader were personal, not political. If she is content, then we are satisfied. She is not content, Vader admitted, surprising them both. But she will be. In time, she will understand why I did what I did. Why the old order had to fall for something better to rise. It was the most honest thing Vader had said since arriving, and it revealed more than he intended. Bail realized with a chill that Vader genuinely believed his own justifications. He had convinced himself that genocide and tyranny were necessary evils, that Padme would eventually forgive him. It was the delusion of a man who had sacrificed everything and couldn't admit it had been for nothing. I hope you're right, Lord Vader, Breha said quietly. For all your sakes. Vader studied the Queen for a long moment, then nodded. Remember this conversation, Senator Organa. Your loyalty to the Empire is noted. See that it remains unwavering. My family is off limits to political maneuvering. Am I understood? Perfectly, my lord. Vader departed without further ceremony, his stormtroopers falling in behind him. As his shuttle lifted toward the Devastator, Bail and Breha stood together in the throne room, the weight of their failure pressing down on them. Obi-Wan asked us to protect those children, Breha whispered. And we can't even reach them. Not yet, Bail replied, his mind already working. But Vader is afraid, Breha. Did you sense it? He's afraid of Palpatine, afraid for his children. That fear is a crack we can exploit. Not now, but someday. They had no way of knowing that their conversation was being monitored, that Imperial intelligence had placed surveillance devices throughout the palace weeks earlier, or that the recording would make its way to Palpatine's desk within hours, confirming the Emperor's suspicions about Alderaan's loyalty. The game of shadows and power continued, with the fate of the galaxy hanging in the balance, and two innocent children sleeping peacefully on Naboo, unaware they were already pieces on a board controlled by Sith lords and desperate rebels alike. 2 years transformed infants into toddlers with distinct personalities and budding force sensitivity that terrified their mother. Luke was curious and fearless, constantly attempting to reach toys that floated just beyond his grasp, sometimes succeeding. When his emotions ran high, Leia was willful and perceptive, her tantrums occasionally accompanied by objects rattling on shelves or lights flickering. Padme watched her children develop powers she couldn't understand or control, and the fear of what they might become consumed her nights. Anakin's visits had settled into a grim routine, once a month now instead of weekly, his duties as the Emperor's enforcer keeping him occupied across the galaxy. Each visit followed the same pattern, hours with the twins teaching them words, showing them holographic star maps, telling them sanitized stories about their father's heroic exploits. Then the inevitable argument with Padme, the accusations and recriminations that ended with Vader departing in cold fury. But this visit was different. Anakin arrived unannounced in the middle of the night, his shuttle touching down in the estate's private landing pad without prior clearance. The stormtrooper garrison snapped to attention, confused by the breach of protocol. Padme woke to the sound of heavy boots on marble floors and her husband's presence in the Force, a dark star that warped everything around it. She found him in the nursery, standing over the twins' beds. Luke and Leia slept peacefully, unaware of the predator watching them. Anakin had removed his helmet, a new addition to his armor, sleek and intimidating though not the sealed life support system Palpatine had originally designed. His yellow eyes glowed in the darkness, reflecting the nightlight's soft illumination. "What are you doing here?" Padme demanded, keeping her voice low to avoid waking the children. "I needed to see them," Anakin said simply, "to remember why I'm doing this." Something in his tone made Padme pause. The usual arrogance was absent, replaced by exhaustion that went beyond physical fatigue. She studied her husband, properly for the first time in months, and noticed details she had missed. The tension in his shoulders, the way his mechanical hand clenched and released rhythmically, the subtle tremor when he reached toward Luke's sleeping form but stopped himself from making contact. "What happened?" she asked, her political instincts recognizing a man in crisis. Anakin was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. "I found Ahsoka." Padme's breath caught. Ahsoka Tano, Anakin's former Padawan, the young Togruta who had been like a little sister to him. Padme had met her several times during the Clone Wars, had seen the bond between master and apprentice, the genuine affection that transcended Jedi doctrine about attachment. Where? Padme whispered. Rada, an agricultural world in the Outer Rim. She was protecting refugees, helping them escape Imperial occupation. Anakin's jaw tightened. She had abandoned her lightsabers, rejected the Jedi way. But she couldn't abandon her nature, couldn't stop helping people. Did you? Padme couldn't finish the question. I tried to turn her, Anakin admitted. Told her the Jedi had failed us both, that the Empire offered a better path, that she could join me, could help shape this new order into something worthy. He laughed bitterly. She refused. Called me a monster. Said the Anakin Skywalker she knew was dead, murdered by Darth Vader. She was right, Padme said quietly. Was she? Anakin rounded on her, his yellow eyes blazing. I gave her every chance to see reason. Showed her mercy when the Emperor ordered her immediate execution. And she threw it back in my face. Chose to run rather than accept reality. You let her go? The question hung in the air. Anakin turned back to the sleeping twins, his expression unreadable. I told the Emperor she died in the confrontation. Submitted a false report. If he discovers the truth, it will be considered treason. Padme felt the world tilt slightly. Anakin had lied to Palpatine, had deliberately disobeyed orders to spare someone he cared about. It was the first crack in the Vader facade she had seen since Mustafar. The first evidence that something of the man she loved might still exist beneath the monster. Why? She asked. Because I've killed enough people I cared about, Anakin said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Obi-Wan, the younglings at the temple, some of them knew me, trusted me. 17 Jedi Masters I once called colleagues. I watched the light leave their eyes and told myself it was necessary. But Ahsoka, he trailed off, his hand finally making contact with Luke's head, stroking the boy's fine hair. She was innocent, young, betrayed by the Jedi Order long before I fell. If anyone deserved a chance to find a different path, it was her. Padme moved closer, drawn by the vulnerability in her husband's voice. Anakin, if you're having doubts. I'm not, he cut her off, the walls slamming back into place. The Empire is necessary. Palpatine's vision of order and security is what the galaxy needs. I haven't forgotten that. But perhaps the methods can be refined. Perhaps there's a way to build this new order without exterminating everyone who remembers the old one. It wasn't redemption. It wasn't even close. But it was doubt, and doubt was a seed that could grow. Padme recognized the opening and knew she had to proceed carefully. The children ask about you, she said, changing tactics. Luke wants to know when Papa is coming home. Leia drew a picture of you. It's mostly black scribbles, but she was very proud of it. Something shifted in Anakin's expression. He looked down at his sleeping children with an expression that was almost paternal, almost human. They're developing force sensitivity earlier than expected. I can feel it when I'm near them. Luke's connection is instinctive, emotional. Leia's is more controlled, more aware. They're 2 years old, Anakin. They're not Jedi or Sith. They're just children. They're my children, Anakin corrected. Heirs to the Chosen One's power. The Force flows through them like a river. With proper training, they could become the most powerful Force users the galaxy has ever seen. The possessiveness in his tone made Padme's blood run cold. You want to train them? Turn them into weapons. I want to teach them to survive, Anakin shot back. The galaxy is dangerous, Padme. The Jedi are gone. But there are still threats, separatist holdouts, criminal syndicates, rival Sith cults that predate even Palpatine. If Luke and Leia don't learn to defend themselves, they'll be targets their entire lives. They're targets because of you, Padme said, her voice hardening. Because you chose to become Darth Vader. Every enemy you make, every atrocity you commit, creates people who will want revenge. And the easiest way to hurt you is through them. The truth of her words struck home. Anakin's fists clenched, the Force rippling around him in waves of barely controlled fury. But he didn't lash out, didn't force choke her or destroy the nursery in a fit of rage. Instead, he simply stood there, wrestling with emotions he had spent 2 years trying to bury beneath Sith philosophy. I know, he finally admitted. Every day I know. That's why I need Palpatine's protection. Why I need the Empire's military might. It's the only way to keep them safe. Or you could walk away, Padme said desperately. Take us somewhere far from Coruscant, far from the Emperor. We could disappear into the Outer Rim. Raise Luke and Leia on some backwater world where no one knows. Darth Vader or the Empire. We could be a family, Ani. A real family. For a heartbeat, she saw longing in his eyes. The possibility dangled before him like a lifeline. Escape, anonymity. A chance to be just Anakin Skywalker again instead of the Emperor's attack dog. But then reality reasserted itself, and the moment passed. Palpatine would hunt us to the ends of the galaxy, Anakin said flatly. He's invested too much in my development, knows too many of my secrets. And the twins, he's aware of their potential. He'd never let them slip through his fingers. The only safety is at the center of power, where I can see threats coming and eliminate them. So we're prisoners, Padme said. All of us. You just have a bigger cage. Anakin had no response to that. He stood in silence, watching his children sleep, the weight of his choices pressing down like a physical force. Finally, he turned toward the nursery door. I'm going to Korriban, he said, an ancient Sith world where the old Dark Lords buried their knowledge. Palpatine has allowed me access to the tombs, to study the techniques that will make me stronger. I'll be gone for several months. Will you come back? The question slipped out before Padme could stop it. Anakin paused at the threshold, his back to her. I always come back. They're my children, Padme. No matter what you think of me, that will never change. He left without another word, his presence in the Force fading as his shuttle lifted toward the stars. Padme sank into the rocking chair between the twins' beds, tears streaming down her face. She had seen a glimpse of her husband beneath the Vader armor, but it only made everything worse. The man she loved was still in there, suffering, trapped by choices he couldn't unmake and a master he couldn't defy. Luke stirred in his sleep, reaching out with tiny hands toward where his father had stood. In the Force, imperceptible to anyone without sensitivity, the boy's unconscious mind searched for the dark presence that had just departed. Finding nothing, Luke settled back into deeper sleep, a small frown creasing his features. Across the room, Leia's eyes opened briefly, brown like her mother's, but carrying a perception far beyond her years. She looked at Padme with an intensity that was almost frightening, as if she understood far more than any toddler should. Then her eyes closed again, and she too returned to sleep. Padme sat in the darkness, rocking slowly, and wondered if there was any future where her children didn't become casualties of their fathers. War against himself. The Empire was rising. The Jedi were dead. And somewhere in the galaxy, Ahsoka Tano was alive because Anakin Skywalker had made one decent choice in 2 years of atrocities. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in the suffocating darkness of the Imperial era, even the smallest light mattered. The ancient tombs of Korriban smelled of death and dark side energy so concentrated it felt like breathing poison. Anakin stood before the entrance to the Valley of the Dark Lords, where generations of Sith had been entombed with their secrets, their holocrons, their twisted legacies. Red sand stretched in every direction beneath a crimson sky, and the wind carried whispers and languages dead for millennia. He was not alone. Emperor Palpatine stood beside him, frail and hunched in his black robes, yet radiating power that made the very ground beneath their feet tremble. This was only the second time in 2 years that they had traveled together, the first being the flight from Mustafar to Polis Massa. The Emperor rarely left Coruscant, preferring to rule from the shadows of his throne room. But Korriban was special, a pilgrimage every true Sith eventually made. Do you feel it, Lord Vader? Palpatine asked, his voice a serpentine hiss. The accumulated power of 1,000 Dark Lords, their knowledge, their rage, their hunger for dominion, all preserved in these tombs, waiting for one strong enough to claim them. I feel it, Anakin confirmed. The dark side here was overwhelming, a tidal wave of malevolent energy that threatened to drown anyone not strong enough to withstand it. But he had been preparing for this. 2 years of meditation, combat, and study had made him formidable. He would not be found wanting. The Jedi feared this place, Palpatine continued, leading the way into the valley, feared the truths buried here. They built their philosophy on denial, deny passion, deny ambition, deny the self. The Sith embrace all of it and become gods. They walked past towering statues of ancient Sith lords whose names had been lost to time. The architecture was brutal and magnificent, designed to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. Anakin recognized some of the symbols carved into the stone, Sith runes he had studied from the few texts Palpatine had shared with him. But there were others, older and stranger. That predated even the ancient Sith Empire. Why bring me here now? Anakin asked. What am I meant to learn? Palpatine stopped before a particular tomb, its entrance guarded by statues of warriors in ancient armor. This is the resting place of Darth Andedu, the Immortal. He was obsessed with conquering death, with preserving his consciousness beyond the body's failure. His holocron contains techniques that even I have not fully mastered. There it was, the real reason for this trip. Palpatine was offering Anakin a glimpse of the power he truly craved, the ability to save Padme not through crude force manipulation, but through genuine understanding of life and death. It was bait, perfectly calculated to exploit Anakin's deepest fear. You said you would teach me to save her, Anakin said carefully. Is this how? Through Andeda's knowledge. Perhaps, Palpatine replied. But such knowledge does not come freely. The ancient Sith protected their secrets jealously. To claim Andedu's holocron, you must prove yourself worthy. The tomb is filled with traps, physical and spiritual. Many Sith apprentices have died attempting this trial. It was a test within a test. Palpatine was measuring Anakin's desperation, his willingness to risk everything for the promise of power. But there was something else beneath the surface, something that made Anakin's instincts scream danger. The Emperor was offering forbidden knowledge, but at what cost? I accept, Anakin said, because refusing was not an option. I will retrieve the holocron. Palpatine's smile widened. Of course you will. But Lord Vader, remember that knowledge has a price. What you learn in that tomb may change you in ways you cannot anticipate. The question is whether you are strong enough to pay that price without losing yourself. The warning was unusual, almost out of character. Palpatine rarely showed concern for his apprentice's well-being, unless the Emperor wanted him to be changed by whatever lay within, wanted him to discover something that would either break him or bind him more completely to the Sith path. Anakin ignited his lightsaber. The blue blade, still not blood red, a detail that annoyed Palpatine, though he never openly commented, casting harsh light on the tomb's entrance. He descended into darkness, leaving his master above to watch and wait. The tomb was a labyrinth of corridors, lined with ancient bones and crumbling murals depicting Andedu's reign. Anakin moved carefully, using the Force to sense traps before they triggered. Pressure plates that would release clouds of toxic gas. Tripwires connected to blade-filled walls. False floors hiding pits lined with spikes. Each trap was designed not just to kill, but to test the intruder's connection to the dark side. Deeper he went, until he reached a chamber where the air itself seemed to writhe with dark side energy. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it rested a pyramidal holocron that pulsed with sickly green light. Anakin approached cautiously, expecting a final trap. Instead, the holocron activated on its own. A holographic figure materialized, an ancient Sith Lord in armor decorated with bones and symbols of death. His face was desiccated, more skull than flesh, but his eyes burned with terrible intelligence. Another supplicant, the holocron's gatekeeper, sneered. Another fool seeking power over death. Tell me, aspirant, why should Darth Andedu share his secrets with you? Because I am strong enough to use them, Anakin replied, and desperate enough to pay any price. Desperation, the gatekeeper mused. Yes, I sense it in you. A festering wound in your spirit. You fear losing someone. A woman? How predictable. My wife is dying, Anakin said through clenched teeth. I need the knowledge to save her. Your wife lives, the gatekeeper corrected. I sense her through your connection, sustained by crude dark side manipulation. But it is a temporary measure, yes? The more you use the technique, the more it corrupts her. Eventually, the very power sustaining her will consume her from within. The words struck Anakin like a physical blow. He had known, on some level, that his method of keeping Padme alive was imperfect, but hearing it confirmed, understanding that he was slowly poisoning her with dark side energy, made something crack inside his chest. Then teach me the proper way, Anakin demanded. Show me how to save her without destroying her. The gatekeeper laughed, a sound like grinding bones. There is no salvation without cost, fool. Andeda's technique requires a sacrifice, life for life, essence for essence. To truly cheat death, you must steal life from another. Is your love strong enough to commit murder for her sake? Are you willing to drain the life from an innocent to sustain your beloved? Anakin stood frozen, the implications crashing over him. The power he sought wasn't miraculous healing. It was vampiric transference. To save Padme completely, he would have to kill someone else. Perhaps multiple someones, if the technique required regular renewal. I've already killed for her, Anakin said quietly. Killed the younglings. Killed Obi-Wan. Killed 17 Jedi Masters. What's a few more deaths? But even as he said the words, he knew they rang hollow. The younglings had been in the heat of the moment, driven by fear and Palpatine's manipulation. The Jedi Masters were enemies of the Empire, threats that needed elimination. But selecting an innocent victim, someone who had done nothing wrong, and deliberately draining their life force to sustain Padme, that was a line he had not yet crossed. You hesitate, the gatekeeper observed. Good. That means you are not yet completely consumed. Endedu became a monster in his quest for immortality, sacrificing entire populations to extend his existence. He lived for centuries, yes, but at the cost of his humanity. Is that the fate you wish for yourself? What are my alternatives? Anakin asked desperately. Accept death, the gatekeeper said simply. All things end. The Force flows through life into death and back into life again. Your wife's time approaches, not today or tomorrow, but eventually. You can spend your remaining years together in love. Or you can become a monster desperately clinging to something already lost. The choice is yours. The holocron dimmed slightly, its gatekeeper waiting for Anakin's decision. Behind him, Anakin sensed Palpatine's presence drawing closer, descending into the tomb to observe the conclusion of this trial. The Emperor wanted to see what Anakin would choose, power at any cost, or the last shred of his humanity. Anakin thought of Luke and Leia, sleeping peacefully, in their nursery on Naboo. Thought of Padme rocking them to sleep, singing lullabies with a voice sustained by his dark side energy. Thought of the family he had destroyed everything to protect. If he embraced Endedu's technique, he would become something even Padme couldn't love. His children would grow up with a father who was literally a monster, someone who murdered innocents to sustain his wife's life. But if he didn't, Padme would die. Eventually, inevitably, the crude technique sustaining her would fail, and he would lose everything. I need time, Anakin said finally. Time to find another way. There must be alternatives. Other Sith knowledge that doesn't require such sacrifice. The gatekeeper's expression was unreadable. Time is the one thing you cannot purchase with power. But very well, take the holocron. Study Endedu's techniques. Perhaps you will discover wisdom he did not. Or perhaps you will simply delay the inevitable. Either way, the knowledge is yours. The holocron fell dormant, becoming simply an artifact instead of an active presence. Anakin picked it up, feeling the weight of dark side energy contained within. Behind him, Palpatine's voice echoed through the chamber. Well done, my apprentice. You have claimed your prize. But tell me, what did you learn from the gatekeeper? What wisdom did Endedu offer? Anakin turned to face his master, the holocron clutched in his hand. For a moment, he considered lying. But Palpatine would sense deception, and the consequences of betraying the Emperor's trust were too severe. He showed me the price of true immortality, Anakin said carefully, and asked if I was willing to pay it. And are you? The question hung in the stale air of the tomb. Anakin met Palpatine's yellow eyes and saw ancient calculation there. The Emperor knew what Endedu's technique required, had known all along. This entire pilgrimage had been designed to present Anakin with an impossible choice: become a monster or accept loss. Either outcome served Palpatine's purposes. I don't know yet, Anakin admitted. But I will study. I will learn. And I will find a way to save my family without losing my soul. Palpatine's expression was unreadable, but satisfaction radiated through the Force. Then let us return to Coruscant. Your education continues, Lord Vader. And the galaxy will not wait while you contemplate philosophy. They ascended from the tomb together, master and apprentice, bound by dark side power and mutual distrust. But something had shifted. Anakin had seen the logical endpoint of the Sith path, immortality purchased with endless murder, power sustained by constant atrocity. It was everything he had feared the Jedi represented. Ideology taken to such an extreme that it destroyed the very things it claimed to protect. The question now was whether he had the strength to find a third path, or whether the dark side would ultimately consume him completely. Above them, Korriban's red sky stretched endlessly, and the whispers of dead Sith Lords promised power, corruption, and the eventual fate of all who sought to defy death itself. 5 years into the Empire's reign, the galaxy had learned to live with tyranny. Resistance movements flickered and died like candle flames in a storm. The Jedi were legend now, their order so thoroughly destroyed that children growing up under Imperial rule knew them only as religious fanatics who had tried to overthrow the Republic. History was being rewritten in real time, and Darth Vader was one of its primary authors. But on Naboo, in the gardens of Varakino, 2 7-year-old children were beginning to ask questions their mother couldn't answer. Why can't we leave? Luke asked for the 1000th time, watching a formation of Imperial patrol craft streak across the sky. Leia, and I want to see other places. The holos show all these amazing worlds. Coruscant with its city planet, Kashyyyk with its giant trees, Tatooine with its twin suns. Padme looked up from the datapad. She'd been reading, sanitized, news reports from the Imperial HoloNet and studied her son. Luke had grown into a curious, energetic boy with his father's mechanical aptitude and her diplomatic temperament. He took things apart constantly, trying to understand how they worked, and his questions about the stormtroopers' armor, the patrol craft's engines, and the estate's security systems demonstrated an analytical mind. It's not safe yet, Padme said, the lie tasting like ash. Your father wants to make sure the galaxy is peaceful before we travel. Father, Leia said from where she sat nearby, her voice carrying skepticism far beyond her years. The man in the black armor who visits every few months and makes you cry after he leaves. Padme flinched. Her daughter was too perceptive, too aware of the tension that filled the estate during Vader's visits. Leia had inherited her mother's political instincts and her father's force sensitivity, a dangerous combination that made her frighteningly observant. He doesn't make me cry, Padme said weakly. We just have disagreements. About us, Luke said, not a question but a statement. About why we can't go to school with other children. About why we only have tutors and the guards in you. They were too smart, both of them. Padme had tried to shield them from the truth, but isolation had made them hyper-aware of their unusual circumstances. The twins knew they were different, knew their situation wasn't normal, even if they didn't understand why. Your father loves you very much, Padme said carefully. Everything he does is to protect you. From what? Leia pressed. What's so dangerous that we need 50 stormtroopers watching us all the time? Before Padme could answer, she felt it, a disturbance in the Force. She had learned to recognize over the years. Despite having no sensitivity herself, Anakin was here, early, unscheduled. Something had happened. The twins felt it too, their Force-sensitive natures responding to their father's presence before he was even visible. Luke stood up excitedly, always eager to see Vader despite Padme's attempts to temper his enthusiasm. Leia remained seated, her expression guarded. She had never warmed to her father the way Luke had, sensing something wrong even if she couldn't articulate what. Vader's shuttle landed in the courtyard, and moments later he strode into the garden. But something was different this time. His armor was scorched and dented, evidence of recent combat. His movements carried an urgency that Padme recognized as dangerous. And most tellingly, he had brought someone with him. A young girl, perhaps 12 years old, with dark hair and terrified eyes. Her hands were bound with stun cuffs, and she flinched away from Vader's presence like a beaten animal. Padme's heart clenched as she recognized Force sensitivity in the girl's aura, faint but present. Anakin, what is this? Padme demanded, stepping between her children and the prisoner. Her name is Sela, Vader said, his voice flat and mechanical through his helmet's vocoder. Daughter of Jedi Knight Ramkoda. I killed her father on Cato, Nymoidia 3 days ago. She witnessed the entire fight. The casual mention of murder in front of their children made Padme's blood boil. But she forced herself to remain calm. And you brought her here because? Because the Emperor wants her interrogated, Vader said. Wants to know if Coda had other surviving contacts. Other Jedi hiding in the Outer Rim. But he paused, something like uncertainty creeping into his voice. I can't do it. Can't torture a child for information. The admission hung in the air, shocking in its vulnerability. Luke and Leia watched with wide eyes as their father, the terrifying figure in black armor, essentially admitted weakness. So you brought her to our home? Padme asked incredulously. Anakin, this is insane. If Palpatine discovers you're harboring a Jedi's daughter. He won't. Vader cut her off. I filed a report saying she died in the confrontation. As far as the Empire knows, Sella doesn't exist. He turned toward the frightened girl. I'm giving you a choice. You can try to run, and you'll be hunted down by every Imperial agent in the galaxy. Or you can stay here, hidden, and live. Sella stared at him with pure hatred. You killed my father. Why would I accept anything from you? Because you're 12 years old and alone in a galaxy that will kill you the moment it discovers what you are. Vader said bluntly. Your father tried to resist the Empire. He failed. You're force-sensitive but untrained. You pose no threat. But the Inquisitors won't see it that way. They'll torture you for information, then execute you. This is the only mercy you'll receive. This isn't mercy, Sella spat. This is guilt. The word struck home. Vader's hand clenched into a fist, and for a moment the air pressure in the garden increased, making breathing difficult. But he didn't lash out, didn't hurt the girl despite her accusation. Instead, he turned to Padme. Keep her here. Tell the staff she's a distant relative, a refugee from the war. No one questions what happens in this estate. She'll be safe. And when Palpatine asks about your mission, Padme asked, I'll tell him what he wants to hear. That Coda's network is scattered, that there are no significant Jedi survivors in that sector. He'll believe me because I've never lied to him before. Vader's voice carried bitter irony. Until now, Padme studied her husband, trying to understand this sudden attack of conscience. In 5 years, he had been a ruthless enforcer of Imperial will, hunting Jedi without mercy, crushing resistance with overwhelming force. But now he stood in her garden with a traumatized child, asking for help and defying his master. Why? She asked simply. Why this girl? Why now? Vader was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made even the stormtroopers, standing guard at a distance, seem to lean closer. Because she looked at me the same way Luke and Leia do sometimes, he admitted. With fear, with confusion about why someone who should protect them is causing them pain instead. And I realized, if I killed her, if I let the Inquisitors have her, I would be creating another orphan. Another child broken by the Empire's brutality. How many more before I become exactly what Obi-Wan accused me of being? It was the most honest thing Anakin had said in 5 years. Padme felt tears threatening and forced them back. This wasn't redemption, not even close. But it was a crack in the foundation. Evidence that some part of Anakin Skywalker still existed beneath the Vader armor. The staff will ask questions, Padme said carefully. Tell them she's Sola's daughter, Vader suggested, referencing Padme's deceased sister. A child orphaned by the war. It's close enough to the truth to be believable. Leia stood up suddenly, her young face set with determination. I'll share my room with her. She shouldn't be alone. Luke nodded eagerly. We can show her the gardens. And the library. And Luke, Leia, Padme interrupted gently. Sella has been through something terrible. She needs time. But Sella was staring at the twins with an expression, somewhere between shock and wonder. You're his children? The children of Darth Vader. I'm Luke, the boy said cheerfully, oblivious to the implications. That's Leia. We're twins. Do you want to see my droid collection? The normalcy of the question, the innocence in Luke's voice, seemed to break something in Sella. She looked between Vader, the man who had killed her father, and these two children who knew nothing of their father's crimes. The absurdity of the situation overwhelmed her, and she started laughing. It was borderline hysterical, edged with grief and shock, but it was also genuine. This is insane, she muttered. This is absolutely insane. Welcome to our family, Leia said dryly, displaying the dark humor that would someday define her. Insanity is standard here. Vader removed Sella's stun cuffs with a gesture, the bindings falling away. You're free to move about the estate. But understand, any attempt to contact the outside will be detected. You endanger not just yourself, but my family. Am I clear? Sella nodded mutely, rubbing her wrists where the cuffs had chafed. She was still terrified, still grieving, but survival instinct had kicked in. This was better than Imperial interrogation, better than death. I need to return to Coruscant, Vader said, addressing Padme. The Emperor expects a full report by morning, but I'll be back soon. He turned to leave, then paused, removed his helmet, something he rarely did anymore. Anakin's face was still young, still handsome, though his eyes remained that unnatural Sith yellow. He looked at his children with an expression Padme hadn't seen in years, genuine paternal affection mixed with profound sadness. "Luke, Leia, I need you to understand something," Anakin said quietly. "The galaxy is more complicated than you know. Good and evil aren't simple concepts. Sometimes people do terrible things for reasons they believe are right. That doesn't excuse the actions, but it explains them." "Are you talking about yourself, Father?" Leia asked with characteristic bluntness. Anakin's smile was bitter. "Yes, Princess. I am." He replaced his helmet and departed, leaving his family standing in the garden with a traumatized Jedi orphan and the weight of impossible truths. Luke immediately tried to engage Sela in conversation, his natural friendliness attempting to bridge the gap of horror. Leia watched her father's shuttle disappear into the sky, her young mind working through calculations and observations that would someday make her a formidable political leader. And Padme held Sela as the girl finally broke down completely, sobbing for her dead father while accepting comfort from the wife of his killer. The irony was not lost on anyone present. That night, after the children were asleep and the estate had settled into its normal secure lockdown, Padme stood in her private quarters staring at her reflection. She was 32 years old but felt ancient. The Force sustained life Anakin had given her came at the cost of accelerated aging and a spiritual exhaustion that no amount of rest could cure. She was living on borrowed time, and they both knew it. But now there was Sela, a living reminder that Anakin was capable of mercy, even if it came too late and too rarely. It was a thread she could pull, a weakness she could exploit, not to destroy him, but to perhaps save what remained of his soul. The game had changed. The gilded cage now housed not just Vader's family, but his conscience made manifest. And somewhere on Coruscant, Emperor Palpatine smiled in his throne room, unaware that his perfect enforcer had just committed his first true act of treason. 3 years later, the carefully maintained illusion shattered like glass. Luke and Leia were 10 years old now, their Force abilities developing in ways that even Anakin's training couldn't fully control. Luke could move objects with casual thought, his connection to the Force instinctive and powerful. Leia's abilities were more subtle, precognitive flashes, empathic sensing, an uncanny ability to know when someone was lying. Together, they were a storm waiting to break. Sela had become part of the family, though her relationship with Vader remained complicated and painful. She was 15 now, her hatred of Anakin tempered by years of observing him with his children. The strange dichotomy of a man who could be gentle with his own while being ruthless with the galaxy. She had begun teaching Luke and Leia basic Force exercises in secret, passing on what little her father had taught her before his death. It was a small rebellion, but it was hers. The day everything changed began like any other. Padme woke to Naboo's golden sunrise, attended to her morning routine, and joined the children for breakfast in the estate's dining hall. But as she sat down, a wave of dizziness washed over her so intense that she gripped the table to steady herself. "Mother!" Leia was at her side instantly, her Force sensitivity detecting something wrong. "I'm fine," Padme said automatically. But she wasn't. The dark side energy Anakin had used to sustain her for 8 years was finally failing, just as Andeddu's holocron had warned. She could feel it, a creeping coldness in her chest, her heart struggling to beat, her lungs fighting for each breath. "You're not fine," Sela said, her limited medical training allowing her to recognize the symptoms. "Your pulse is erratic. You need medical attention." "No doctors," Padme insisted. "The staff reports everything too." She didn't finish the sentence. Darkness rushed in from the edges of her vision, and she collapsed. The last thing she heard was Luke screaming for help and Leia's calm voice issuing orders to the panicking household staff. When she woke, she was in the estate's medical wing, hooked to monitors that beeped with alarming irregularity. A medical droid hovered nearby. But more significantly, Anakin stood at her bedside, his helmet removed and his yellow eyes fixed on her, with an intensity that was almost painful to witness. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. 3 days, Anakin said. "You've been unconscious for 3 days. The droid says your heart is failing. Your lungs are deteriorating. Your entire body is shutting down." The dark side energy, Padme said, confirming what they both knew. It's been poisoning me. Slowly. All these years. I can sustain you again, Anakin said desperately, reaching for her hand. I can. No. Padme's grip was surprisingly strong for someone dying. No more, Anakin. I don't want to live like this anymore. Sustained by the dark side, trapped in this estate. Watching you become more of a monster with each passing year. If this is the end, then let it be the end. I can't lose you. The words came out broken, raw with emotion that Vader rarely allowed himself to express. Padme, I destroyed the Republic for you. Killed Obi-Wan for you. Everything I've done has been to keep you alive. I never asked you to, Padme whispered. I wanted you on not an empire built on corpses. Not a husband who murders children. Just you. The door burst open, and Luke and Leia rushed in, trailed by Sela, who tried unsuccessfully to hold them back. The twins had clearly been crying, their faces blotchy and red, but Leia's expression carried something else, fury directed squarely at their father. Fix her, Luke demanded, his young voice cracking. You're powerful. You can do anything. Fix Mother. It's not that simple, Anakin began. You're lying. Leia cut him off. You're always lying. About the Empire, about the Jedi. About why we can't leave, about everything. The accusation hit Anakin like a physical blow. He looked at his daughter and saw someone who had inherited both his Force sensitivity and Padme's moral clarity, a dangerous combination. What do you know about the Jedi? Anakin asked carefully. Sela told us, Leia said defiantly. Told us what really happened. That you killed them. That you destroyed the temple. That you murdered her father and brought her here as some kind of twisted penance. Anakin's gaze snapped to Sela, who stood in the doorway with her chin raised defiantly. I told them the truth. They deserve to know what their father really is. The air pressure in the room increased as Anakin's rage built. But before he could lash out, Padme's weak voice cut through the tension. Anakin, don't. She's right. They deserve to know. Luke looked between his parents, his world crumbling. Father, tell me it's not true. Tell me you didn't kill innocent people. The plea in his son's voice was devastating. Anakin could lie, could spin the narrative the way Palpatine had taught him. The Jedi were traitors. The younglings were casualties of war. Everything was necessary for peace. But looking into Luke's blue eyes, his eyes, before the dark side had changed them, he found he couldn't do it. It's true, Anakin said quietly. All of it. I killed the Jedi. I destroyed the Republic. I became Darth Vader because I was afraid of losing your mother. And now she's dying anyway, Leia said, her voice hard with accusation. So what was it all for? The question hung in the air like a death sentence. Anakin had no answer. 8 years of atrocities, thousands dead by his hand, an entire galaxy subjugated, and Padme was still slipping away. There is one way, Anakin said finally, his voice hollow. And Dedu's technique. Life for life. I can transfer someone else's life force into her. Completely. Permanently. No, Padme said immediately. Absolutely not. It's murder, Sela said flatly. You're talking about killing an innocent person to save her. Not innocent, Anakin countered, his mind already working through possibilities. A criminal. Someone scheduled for execution anyway. The Empire has thousands in detention awaiting termination for various crimes. What difference does it make if they die now versus later? The difference is you'd be using them as fuel, Leia said, her young face twisted with disgust. That's not justice. That's just evil. I'm already evil, Anakin shot back. I've been evil for 8 years. What's one more atrocity if it saves your mother? Listen to yourself. Padme struggled to sit up, pain lancing through her chest. Listen to what you've become. You've rationalized every terrible thing you've done, convinced yourself it was necessary, and now you're prepared to commit murder again just to avoid facing the consequences of your choices. The consequence is you dying. Anakin roared, the force exploding outward. Medical equipment shorted out, windows cracked, and everyone in the room was driven to their knees by the sheer pressure of his power. I will not lose you. I will not let the one good thing I've done, keeping you alive, and in failure. In that moment, fully unleashed, Anakin Skywalker revealed the depth of his power. He had been holding back for years, maintaining control, but now all pretense dropped. The Force bent to his will like a sentient thing, responding to his rage and desperation with apocalyptic intensity. And Luke, watching his father's meltdown, felt something awaken inside himself. His own power rose in response, instinctive and untrained, creating a counter-pressure that pushed back against Vader's overwhelming presence. Father and son stood on opposite sides of Padmé's medical bed, two Force-sensitive beings engaged in an unconscious contest of wills. "Stop it!" Padmé screamed, her weak voice somehow cutting through. "Both of you stop!" The pressure released. Anakin staggered back, shocked by what had just happened. Luke had challenged him. His 10-year-old son had instinctively resisted his power. The boy was stronger than Anakin had realized, his potential truly terrifying. "You can't save everyone." "Father," Luke said quietly, tears streaming down his face. "Master Yoda used to say," he paused, glancing at Sella, who had told him stories of the Jedi, "that attachment leads to suffering." Maybe he was right. The Jedi were fools, Anakin snarled. Their philosophy of detachment is why they failed. Love is not weakness. Protecting those you care about is not wrong. But destroying everything else to do it is, Leia interjected. "Father, can't you see? You didn't save Mother. You trapped her. You trapped us. You trapped yourself. None of us are free. We're all prisoners of your fear." The words struck deeper than any lightsaber. Anakin looked around the medical wing at his dying wife, his disillusioned children, the Jedi orphan he had tried to spare, the life he had built on foundations of corpses and lies. And for the first time in 8 years, he truly saw what he had become. Not a savior, not a protector, not even a necessary evil. Just a monster who had destroyed everything he touched while convincing himself it was for their own good. "Padmé," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Tell me what to do? Please. I don't know how to fix this." Padmé reached out with trembling hands, taking his face between her palms. The gesture was intimate, familiar, an echo of 1,000 moments from their life before everything fell apart. "You can't fix it, Ani," she said gently. "Some things are broken beyond repair. But you can stop making it worse. You can let me go. You can let the children grow up free, away from the Empire, away from Palpatine. You can give them the choice you never had. If I defy the Emperor, he'll kill them," Anakin said. He suspected for years that Luke and Leia could threaten his power. "The only thing keeping them safe is my loyalty." "Then take them somewhere he can't reach," Sella said suddenly. "The Outer Rim. Wild space. Somewhere beyond the Empire's control. Start over." Anakin laughed bitterly. "There is nowhere in the galaxy beyond Palpatine's reach. And even if there was, I'm not the man who could give them a normal life. I'm Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer. I'm too far gone." "You saved me," Sella pointed out. "You could have killed me, but you didn't. That counts for something. One decent act in 8 years of atrocities doesn't balance the scales." "No," Padmé agreed. "But it's a start." She coughed, blood flecking her lips. The medical droid chirped urgently, its sensors detecting critical deterioration. Time was running out, and everyone in the room knew it. "I'm going to die, Anakin," Padmé said with calm certainty. "Today, tomorrow, maybe next week if I'm unlucky. The question is what you do after. Do you let my death destroy you completely? Or do you use it to become something better than what you are now?" "I don't know how to be anything else," Anakin admitted, the confession tearing out of him. "Then learn," Padmé whispered. "For them. For Luke and Leia. They deserve a father who is more than just fear and rage and darkness." She closed her eyes, exhausted beyond measure. The monitors beeped their steady march towards silence. And Anakin Skywalker, kneeling beside the bed of his dying wife, finally understood the true cost of the choices he had made on Mustafar 8 years earlier. He had won the duel with Obi-Wan, had survived intact, powerful, and fully capable. But in doing so, he had sentenced himself to something far worse than the cybernetic prison Palpatine had originally designed. He had become his own jailer, trapped in a cage built from fear, sustained by atrocity, and locked from the inside. The question now was whether he had the strength to find the key. Padmé Amidala died 3 days later, surrounded by her children and the man who had both saved and destroyed her. Her last words were not of forgiveness or condemnation, but simple instruction: protect them, not from the galaxy, from yourself. The funeral was a quiet affair, attended only by the estate staff and a handful of dignitaries Anakin permitted. Bail Organa came from Alderaan, his presence a statement of loyalty to Padme's memory. Despite the danger it represented, the Empire's official statement declared that Lady Vader had succumbed to complications from an old war injury, a sanitized lie that fooled no one who knew the truth. Palpatine did not attend. Instead, he sent a message of condolence that dripped with false sympathy and barely concealed satisfaction. The Emperor had always seen Padme as a weakness in his apprentice's armor, an attachment that could be exploited. Her death should have freed Vader, made him more pliable, more willing to embrace the dark side completely. It had the opposite effect. Anakin stood at Padme's graveside in the gardens of Varekino as they lowered her body into Naboo's soil, and something fundamental broke inside him. Not his spirit that had shattered years ago, but rather the careful rationalization he had built around his actions, the elaborate justification for every atrocity. Without Padme to save, what was the point? Without her to protect, why had he done any of it? The answer was standing beside him. Luke and Leia, dressed in black mourning clothes, their young faces carved from grief and confusion. They were all he had left, the last good thing to come from his relationship with Padme. And they looked at him with barely concealed fear and resentment. He had destroyed his wife through trying to save her. He would not make the same mistake with his children. "Pack your things," Anakin said quietly after the ceremony, addressing Luke, Leia, and Sela. "We're leaving Naboo tonight." "Where are we going?" Luke asked, his voice hollow with grief. "Away," Anakin replied. "Somewhere the Empire can't easily reach. Somewhere you can grow up as something other than my children." Leia's eyes narrowed with suspicion. "What about the Emperor? Won't he hunt us?" "Let him try," Anakin said. And there was something new in his voice, not rage or arrogance, but cold determination. "I've spent 8 years serving Palpatine's vision of order. I think it's time I reminded him why the prophecy called me the Chosen One." Bail Organa, who had been standing respectfully distant, approached cautiously. "Lord Vader, if I may, Alderaan could provide sanctuary. The Queen and I would welcome the children, could ensure their safety and education." Anakin studied the senator, seeing through to the man's genuine concern for Luke and Leia. Bail had loved Padme as a friend and colleague, had watched her slow death with helpless frustration. This offer was sincere, not political maneuvering. "No," Anakin said finally. "Your world is too visible, too important to the Empire. Palpatine would see the children as hostages to ensure your continued cooperation. I need somewhere more remote." "The Outer Rim," Bail suggested carefully. "Beyond even that," Anakin replied. "Wild space. The unknown regions. Somewhere not on any Imperial star chart." What he didn't say, what he barely admitted to himself, was that he needed distance not just from the Emperor, but from himself. He needed time to figure out how to be a father instead of Darth Vader. And that transformation, if it was even possible, would require space to fail without catastrophic consequences. That night, as promised, they departed. Not in an Imperial shuttle that would be tracked, but in a civilian transport Anakin had purchased through black market channels months earlier, a contingency plan he had never expected to use. The ship was a modified YT-1300 light freighter, fast and nondescript, the kind of vessel smugglers preferred for its anonymity. As they broke atmosphere, alarms screamed through Imperial channels. The garrison at Varekino reported Lord Vader's unauthorized departure with his children. Within minutes, star destroyers in orbit received orders to intercept and detain. But Anakin had anticipated this. Using his authority codes one last time, he transmitted a priority override that bought them crucial minutes. By the time the star destroyers realized the codes had been revoked, the freighter had already jumped to hyperspace. In the pilot's seat, Anakin plotted a course that would take them through a dozen random hyperspace jumps, each one designed to throw off pursuit. Beside him, Sela watched with grudging admiration. "You planned this," she said. "How long have you been preparing to betray the Emperor?" "Since Corbin," Anakin admitted. "Since I saw what I would become if I continued down the Sith path. I just needed a catalyst. Padme's death was that catalyst." In the cargo hold, Luke and Leia sat together in silence, processing everything that had happened in the last week. Their mother was dead. Their father had revealed himself as a mass murderer. And now they were fugitives from the very empire their father had helped create. "Do you think he can change?" Luke asked his sister quietly. Leia was silent for a long moment. Her force sensitivity, more attuned to emotions than her brothers, could feel the turmoil radiating from their father in the cockpit. Pain, guilt, self-loathing. And beneath it all, genuine love for them mixed with terror of losing them. I don't know, Leia admitted. But Mother believed he could. That has to count for something. 3 hyperspace jumps later, they arrived at a nameless moon in wild space. Far from established trade routes or Imperial patrols, the moon was habitable but, barely, a frontier world with harsh weather and limited resources. It was exactly what Anakin needed. A place where they could disappear while he figured out what came next. They established a rough camp in an abandoned mining facility, using the freighter's supplies to make the space livable. It was a far cry from the luxury of Varakino, but there was something liberating about it. No stormtroopers, no surveillance, no Empire dictating their every move. On the 3rd night, as the children slept, Anakin sat alone staring at his lightsaber. The blade had never been bled to crimson, a detail that had always irritated Palpatine but that Anakin had stubbornly maintained. Now he understood why. Some part of him had always resisted complete transformation into a Sith, had kept this one connection to the Jedi he had been, even while slaughtering them. You're not sleeping, Sella's voice came from the shadows. Anakin didn't turn. Neither are you. She sat down across from him. This young woman he had made an orphan and then tried to save as penance. What's the plan? We can't hide here forever. Eventually, the Empire will find us. Then I'll deal with the Empire, Anakin said simply. You're one person. The Empire has millions of soldiers, thousands of ships. You can't fight them all. No, Anakin agreed. But I can fight Palpatine. And without him, the Empire is just a military structure without direction. It will fracture, devolve into warlordism. Chaos, certainly, but also opportunity for something better to emerge. Sella studied him with eyes that had seen too much for her 15 years. You're talking about killing the Emperor. About assassinating the most powerful Sith Lord in history. I'm talking about fulfilling the prophecy, Anakin corrected. Bringing balance to the Force by destroying the Sith. Both of them, Palpatine and myself. The words hung in the air. Sella felt cold dread settle in her stomach. You're planning to die. I'm planning to give Luke and Leia a galaxy worth inheriting, Anakin said. Whether I survive that process is irrelevant. They just lost their mother, Sella said quietly. Losing you too will destroy them. Keeping me will destroy them worse. Anakin replied. Every day I exist, I'm a reminder of what they could become. Luke especially. I feel his power growing. Feel the same potential for darkness that consumed me. If I stay, I'll poison them the way I poisoned Padme. Or you could choose to be better, Sella suggested. Could actually raise them instead of abandoning them through death. Anakin finally looked at her, his yellow eyes meeting her dark ones. You hate me. You have every right to. So why are you arguing for me to live? Because they love you, Sella said simply. Luke and Leia, despite everything you've done, despite knowing what you are, they love you. And love is supposed to be stronger than hate. The Jedi taught that. Your actions have made me doubt it, but watching your children, maybe they're right. The insight from a Jedi orphan was almost too much to bear. Anakin looked away, unable to meet her gaze. My father used to say that the Force flows through all living things. Sella continued, that even the darkest person has light within them, buried but not extinguished. He died believing that, believing in redemption even for Sith Lords. She paused, her voice hardening. I don't know if I believe it, but I think you should try, for their sake. Before Anakin could respond, the freighter's proximity alarm screamed. Both of them jumped to their feet as sensor displays lit up with incoming contacts. 3 Imperial Star destroyers had just dropped out of hyperspace in orbit above their moon. Impossible. They had been so careful, covered their tracks so thoroughly. Unless. The freighter, Anakin snarled. Palpatine must have planted a tracker. He knew I might run, planned for it. Luke and Leia burst from their sleeping quarters, awakened by the alarms. Through the facility's transparisteel viewports, they could see drop ships descending through the atmosphere like falling stars. They found us, Leia said, her voice unnaturally calm for a 10-year-old facing Imperial assault. How many? Luke asked, his hand instinctively reaching for anything he could use as a weapon. Anakin pulled up tactical displays, his mind shifting instantly into combat mode. 3 full battalions of stormtroopers, 6 AT-AT walkers, and his blood ran cold as he identified the final signature. An Inquisitor. Palpatine sent one of his Force-sensitive hunters. The Inquisitors were fallen Jedi, broken and twisted into dark side servants who specialized in hunting their former comrades. This particular Inquisitor, designated as the Grand Inquisitor, was one of the most dangerous. A former Jedi Temple guard who had intimate knowledge of Jedi techniques and philosophies. "We need to run," Sella said, moving toward the freighter. "No time," Anakin replied, watching the drop ships close in. "They'll shoot us down the moment we lift off." "We fight against 3 battalions?" Sella asked incredulously. Anakin looked at his children, saw the fear in their eyes mixed with determination. They were so young, too young for this. But the galaxy had never cared about fairness. And if he was going to die making one decent choice, it would be protecting them. "Get Luke and Leia to the deepest part of the mining facility," Anakin ordered Sella. "There are old tunnels that lead to the far side of the mountain range. Take the emergency supplies and run. Don't stop until you're off this moon." "What about you?" Luke asked, his voice cracking. Anakin knelt before his son, placing both hands on the boy's shoulders. "I'm going to do what I should have done 8 years ago. I'm going to stand between innocent people and the Empire's cruelty, even if those innocent people happen to be my children." "Father," Leia began. "No arguments." Anakin cut her off, but his voice was gentle. "I've made enough mistakes for 10 lifetimes. Let me make one right choice. Please." He pulled both children into a fierce embrace, memorizing the feel of them, knowing this might be the last time. "Remember that I loved you. Whatever else you learn about me, whatever terrible truths history records, remember that I loved you and your mother more than anything in the galaxy." Then he released them and ignited his lightsaber, the blue blade that had never turned red, that had somehow remained pure despite wielding it in service of atrocity. "Now run, and don't look back." As Sella herded Luke and Leia toward the facility's depths, Anakin Skywalker walked out to meet the Empire alone. Above him, drop ships landed in precise formations, disgorging hundreds of stormtroopers. AT-AT walkers thundered across the rocky terrain, their massive forms designed to intimidate and destroy. And descending from a command shuttle came the Grand Inquisitor, his double-bladed lightsaber spinning in an impressive but ultimately performative display. Anakin stood before them all, one man against an army. And for the first time in 8 years, he felt something like peace. This was what the Chosen One was meant for. Not ruling, not dominating, but standing against darkness, even when that darkness wore his own face. The prophecy had never specified how balance would be achieved. Perhaps it required the Chosen One to destroy both Sith Lords, starting with the one he saw in the mirror. "Lord Vader," the Grand Inquisitor called out. "By order of the Emperor, you and your children are to return to Coruscant immediately. Surrender, and we will show mercy." Anakin smiled, a genuine expression of dark humor. "You know, I've committed terrible crimes, slaughtered innocents, destroyed everything I touched, but I've never been a liar." He raised his lightsaber into a ready position, Form V, the aggressive style he had mastered as a Jedi and perfected as a Sith. "So I'll tell you the truth. None of you are leaving this moon alive." The battle began, and in the tunnels below, running toward a future they couldn't predict, Luke and Leia Skywalker felt their father's presence in the Force, brilliant, blazing, consuming itself in one final act of protection. They didn't look back. They had been told not to, but they felt every moment of what came next, the Force connecting them to their father's last stand in ways they wouldn't understand for years. The galaxy would never be the same. The Battle of the Nameless Moon, as it would later be recorded in fragmentary historical accounts, lasted 4 hours. When Imperial reinforcements arrived at dawn, they found a charnel house. 3 battalions of stormtroopers reduced to scattered armor and ash. 6 AT-AT walkers collapsed into twisted metal sculptures, their reactor cores breached by precise lightsaber strikes. And in the center of the carnage, 2 bodies, the Grand Inquisitor, bisected cleanly through the torso, and Darth Vader, kneeling in a meditation pose, his lightsaber extinguished beside him. He had taken a dozen blaster bolts to the chest and back, any one of which should have been fatal. His armor was scorched and broken, His breathing labored. But he was alive when they found him. Yellow eyes staring at nothing, waiting for death that refused to come quickly. They transported him to Coruscant in restraints designed to contain Force-sensitive prisoners, though he made no attempt to resist. Emperor Palpatine received his fallen apprentice in the throne room, surrounded by royal guards and inquisitors, prepared for treachery. What he found instead was a broken man who had finally run out of justifications. "You disappoint me, Lord Vader," Palpatine said, his voice cold with suppressed rage. "After everything I gave you, power, position, purpose, you betray me for sentiment, for children who will never forgive what you are." Anakin looked up at his master, and for the first time in 8 years, spoke without the Vader persona. "You gave me nothing but chains. I forged them myself, yes, but you were the locksmith. The children escaped. That's all that matters. They will be found," Palpatine promised. "The galaxy is vast, but not infinite. And when we find them, they will serve the Empire as you should have." "Then you'll have to kill me first," Anakin said simply. "Because the next time I see you, Master, I'm taking your head." Palpatine laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Bold words from a dying man. But I am not without mercy." He gestured, and medical droids approached, with the cybernetic components he had, originally designed 8 years earlier. "You will be rebuilt, sealed in armor that will sustain your life and bind you to my will. You will serve Vader. You will hunt your children across the stars and bring them to me. And you will do it because you have no choice." The surgery took days. When it was complete, Darth Vader rose from the medical table encased in black armor, his breathing sustained by mechanical respirators, his body more machine than man. The prison Palpatine had originally planned had finally been constructed, 8 years late, but no less effective. But something had changed. In the depths of agony during reconstruction, Anakin had made a choice. He would serve the Empire, would hunt the rebellion, would be everything Palpatine demanded, but he would also ensure that Luke and Leia survived, that they grew strong enough to destroy what he had helped create. The prophecy had not been fulfilled, but perhaps it had only been delayed. Far across the galaxy, on a moisture farm on Tatooine, a young boy named Luke lived with his aunt and uncle, learning to repair vaporators and dreaming of adventure. On Alderaan, adopted by Senator Bail Organa and Queen Breha, a young girl named Leia studied politics and diplomacy, unaware of her true parentage. And on a dozen different worlds, Sella moved between them, carrying messages, ensuring they remained hidden, remembering the man who had killed her father but saved her life. The Empire would stand for decades more. The Emperor would rule with absolute authority, and Darth Vader would become legend, a terrifying enforcer in black armor, whose origins were whispered about but never confirmed. But in the shadows, a different story was being written. A story of 2 children with unprecedented force potential, growing up separately, unaware of each other, being shaped by their experiences, into the weapons that would eventually pierce the Empire's heart. The man who had killed Obi-Wan Kenobi had ensured one thing. Through his final act of defiance, his children would have the choice he never did. They would decide their own fate. And when they finally learned the truth, when Luke and Leia discovered that the galaxy's most feared enforcer was their father, that Darth Vader had once been Anakin Skywalker, they would face an impossible question. Can a man who destroyed everything still be redeemed? Can love survive in the shadow of atrocity? The Force offered no easy answers. It simply flowed, connecting all things, waiting for balance that might take a generation to achieve. The Chosen One had killed his master and survived, had saved his children at the cost of his freedom, had chosen, in one terrible moment, to be something more than Darth Vader. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a beginning. And in the darkness of the Imperial era, even the smallest light mattered. The galaxy would remember Padme Amidala, who loved a hero and mourned a monster. It would remember Obi-Wan Kenobi, whose death on Mustafar denied him the chance to guide the next generation. And it would remember the 2 children who carried the weight of their father's sins and the hope of their mother's dreams.